hands into its squat, repulsive features, and from generally polluting the juju hut, not to mention the thorough and profitable looting of the place. They had got away with the plunder, gold dust, and a handful of splendid Canary diamonds before the Bakoto warriors had returned. But fear had followed them, stalked them, trailed them. A fear different from any they had experienced before. And be it mentioned that their path of life had been crimson and twisted and fantastic, that they had followed the little squinting, swarth-headed, hunchbacked genie of adventure wherever man's primitive lawlessness rules above the law, from Nome to Timbuktu, from Peru to the black felt tents of outer Mongolia, from the Australian bush to the absinthe-sodded Apache haunts of Paris. Be it mentioned, furthermore, that thus often they had stared death in the face and, not being fools, had found the staring distasteful and shivery. But what they had felt on that journey, back to the security of the coast and the ragged Union Jack flapping disconsolately above the British governor's official corrugated iron mansion, had been something worse than mere physical fear. It had been a nameless, brooding, sinister apprehension, which had crept through their souls, a harshly discordant note that had pealed through the hidden recesses of their beings. Everything had seemed to mock them. The crawling, sour miasmic jungle, the slippery roots and timber falls, the sun of the tropics, brown, decayed like the sun on the day of judgment, the very flowers, spiky, odorous, waxen, unhealthy, lascivious. At night, when they had rested in some clearing, they had even feared their own campfire, flaring up, twinkling, flickering, then coiling into a ruby ball. It had seemed completely isolated in the purple night. Isolated. And they had longed for human companionship, white companionship. White faces, white slang, white curses, white odors, white obscenities. Why, they would have welcomed a decent, square, honest, white murder, a knife flashing in some yellow-haired Norse sailor's brawny fist, a belaying pin in the hand of some bullying Liverpool tramp ship skipper, some gnome gambler's six-gun splattering leaden death, some Apache of the Rue de Venise garroting a passer-by. But here, in the African jungle, and how Stuart McGregor remembered it, the fear of death had seemed pregnant with unmentionable horror. There had been no sounds except the buzzing of tsetse flies and a faint rubbing of drums, whispering through the desert and jungle like the voices of disembodied souls, astray on the outer rim of creation. And, overhead, the stars. Always at night, 3 stars, glittering, leering. And Stuart McGregor, who had gone through college and had once written his college measure of limping, anemic verse, had pointed at them. "The 3 stars of Africa," he had said. "The star of violence, the star of lust, and the little stinking star of greed." And he had broken into staccato laughter, which had struck Farragut Hutchinson as singularly out of place and had caused him to blurt forth with a wicked curse, "Shut your trap, you!" For already they had begun to quarrel, these 2 pals of a dozen tight, riotous adventures. Already, imperceptibly, gradually, like the shadow of a leaf through summer dusk, a mutual hatred had grown up between them. But they had controlled themselves. The diamonds were good, could be sold at a big figure, and, even split in 2, would mean a comfortable stake. Then, quite suddenly, had come the end for one of them. And the twisting, gliding skill of Stuart McGregor's fingers had made sure that Farragut Hutchinson should be that one. Years after, when Africa as a whole had faded to a memory of coiling, unclean shadows, Stuart McGregor used to say, with that rather plaintive, monotonous drawl of his, that the end of this phantasmal African adventure had been different from what he had expected it to be. In a way, he had found it disappointing. Not that it had lacked in purely dramatic thrills and blood-curdling trimmings. That wasn't it. On the contrary, it had had a plethora of thrills.